The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back to the Sustainable Voice. This is your host, Ashish. I've got a special guest today. Robin, say hi.
Hello, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for
So
having me.
you guys are in for a treat. Robin and I have actually traveled to Colombia together. We're going to be heading to Egypt as well. We started a really cool conversation last week on Robin's podcast that we're going to carry on here. So Robin, you're actually one of our first guests that have been on the show, but you're more like a co-host. I mean, we've known each other for so long, and we can talk for hours. Tell everybody about your podcast, because I love being a guest on your podcast, and we thought it was a great idea to join here. But tell us about the vision for your podcast.
Okay. So I started a podcast called The Intrepid Traveler, and my idea was to talk to people such as yourself that are on the other side of planning travel in the world of travel. And so it's been great because I've been able to introduce my audience to how things work when I plan their travels and who my favorite partners are to work with, which is obviously why I've had you on the show so many times.
Well, and I tell everybody this when we travel together. You know, you're one of the most observant people. So I have to share with all of you. Robin and I were in Colombia together in May. And, you know, she picked up on little things. We were talking about the broad strokes of transformation. You know, on our last podcast and the previous episodes, you guys have heard me talk about the transformation in Colombia, specifically the transformation in Medellin and what that looks like. Robin picked up on something really, really cool though that I wanted to share with you. So, you know, why don't we start there, Robin? We were specifically in a little location in Medellin, and you picked up on something when it came to women, women and travel and women's rights and in that country. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I really noticed was that the women in the community where we went and visited it were the glue, absolutely the glue. And they also were revered by the
Yeah.
men in the community, which I thought was really refreshing to see both of those things come together. And the people that you introduced us to and that we toured with talked about them and the effects that they had had on their own lives, as far as maybe being raised, or them as far as taking care of the children in the community, as far as staying in the communities when they had the opportunities to leave and go places and, presumably, quote, quote, maybe better their lives. They chose to stay.
And you know, this is so amazing because you know, the previous episodes I have talked about this with our listeners and talked about just what you just said, that the people that came here to escape, to came to Comuna 13 and the other comunas to escape what was happening in Medellin and a larger part of Colombia during the 80s and 90s. And now they don't want to leave. And when we were there together and we were looking at the graffiti art, we looked at how they were taking in Venezuelans, and their motto was that, you know, they were there for us in our time of need. Now it's our time for them. And then we went up into the community, up the steps to visit Tia and her ice cream, and of course we were touring around there as well. You noticed, and you said this, right? The women being the glue, the kind of the glue that held the community together. Now, I am the first one to tell you that if you had to pick, women are the smarter of the species. I am the first one to admit it, and it's not because I'm terrified of you. It's because I really, really do mean that. So, you know, when you came through, you were having a conversation actually with a couple of the guides there, the local representatives. Was there any particular topic that came up, or anything in specifics that you could jog your memory that you remember vividly?
Well, I think I remember talking a bit about really their growing up. And, the thing that struck me was the way they so freely and openly talked
Yeah.
about love. And these big burly guys with tattoos everywhere and piercings and all of this stuff that I think that we generally equate with scary people. um, it's
Yeah.
sad but true. If you're doing the judge a
Right.
book by the cover and you see one of these people, you're like, and getting to talk with them, and every one of them mentioned their mother, their grandmother, their sisters, their daughters, their, you can, and love. I literally
Yeah.
said love. And, we're always making this, the sign of the heart with their hands, and talking about how that has saved their communities. And I know from just listening to them, and being a woman and having two sons myself, that that's where that love came from, was these women in their lives.
When we talk on this podcast, a lot of the times, and obviously the main focus of this entire podcast is about big successes in small places. You can't get smaller than a narrow bylane in a community outside of a major city. You can't get any smaller than
Yeah.
that. And I've been to this place 35 plus times, and every time you see something new and there's something more endearing. Every single time something endears you more, something gets you just really, really, really clued in, and that's just, it's special in terms of it.
Yeah.
So part of what part of what I love traveling with you is that, again, you bring a different perspective, and you're so observant, as I was saying, in terms of things that even I didn't see. So, like, for example, and it could be because I'm a guy, and it could be because I'm blind or selective vision. Who knows? I'll admit to all of that right now.
Well, that's all right. Just keep taking me
Yeah,
with you, and then you'll have those
that's right.
superpowers of
My
observation with you at all
superpower
times.
is I know how woefully inadequate I am at certain things. So I am willing to admit that. But
Uh,
it actually tells the story. What you're talking about tells the story the right way, because it talks about the fact that it is the glue. You think about this, right? So these people moved into this community to escape what was a violent past, and they moved this community, and now that you said they don't want to leave, but it is very much the women that moved them there in the first place to keep their families together. It was very much the women that coped with keeping their families together when there was either no money or no more food or hardship or whatever the case may be. They still stayed, and that was key in terms of this. That was the main thing in terms of what we do and how we do. So I noticed that from an early age. I noticed that from the earliest times visiting there. And it's not just in Colombia, but other places here. But this community in particular, it was everything from
mhm.
Tia, right, with her ice cream cones and the flavors she was offering in that ice, that mango and pistachio and what other flavors they had.
Yeah.
It was the simplest of things, but it was a tradition,
Yeah.
tradition for her. So my question to you is this: how much of what you saw do you think is steeped in tradition, and how much of it do you think is pride?
Wow.
Hey, by the way, listeners,
I think,
watch this. She's going to give one of the most awesome and intelligent answers ever, and she's going to prove how woefully inadequate I am right now. Watch.
no pressure, no pressure. I think that it was just the marriage of those two aspects. And when you said pride, I think a lot of people would immediately think of pride in terms of somebody who's kind of puffed up, but it's not that. It's a pride in their community and their families and what they've built, and being a part of that, and continuing to live in that, because they've been through that dark
Right.
time and those difficult times, and they've come out the other side, and they know in their heart of hearts that they had so much to do with that. And they don't want a pat on the back, and they don't want a monetary reward for it or anything. What they see happening in their community with their families is reward enough.
See, that's pretty powerful. And by the way, which flavor was your favorite? The ice cream or the ice? Which flavor was your favorite when you tried it?
Oh,
Oh,
I
yeah, the
had the
mango.
mango, and there was something else in there. I can't remember what it was right now, but it was the green
Yes.
mango. It was the green mango, and it was, oh my gosh, it was
It
delicious.
was
Yeah,
it was
it was.
it's messy to eat, but oh, it was. And
Yeah,
remember the
yeah.
coffee? Remember the
Don't
coffee
miss
that
it.
we had? Uh,
Which
well,
one?
the one
Where?
where everything was stuck on the ceiling, that little cafe.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, that was fabulous. That was fabulous. I actually have a picture of me behind the counter there. I was taking a picture. It was really cool. I was taking a picture of some of the artwork that they had done, and I was looking at it, I'm taking the picture, and the lady comes along again, the woman that's there. She comes along and she like takes my camera and she's like, "Here you go, you go," and she puts me behind the camera and she's taking pictures of
I
everything. It
think
was
she
really
was
cool.
hiring you. She
Yeah,
was like, no, 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 you stay now, stay.
like you're
You're
the
not
new
supposed to go.
barista.
I'm being serious. Actually, it wasn't a photo op. You're hired. Uh,
Yeah, right. I probably make a actually better bartender than barista. I
I
think. Yeah.
mean, I always wonders never cease. I've said in a previous podcast, you're one of the most intelligent people I know. Well, barista to bartender takes a lot of talent to begin with, so there's that. And even the artwork. Since we're talking about that, it wasn't just the people; it's the expression, right? When we were in that area of Community
Absolutely.
13, you saw graffiti street art,
Hmm.
we saw music,
Hmm.
we saw art, just actual canvas art, we saw food, yeah,
Dancing.
dancing, everything was about
Hmm.
expression. How much of
Hmm.
that is, do you think, due to the glue that you were saying earlier that's holding that community together? How much of that is in that
Oh, yeah.
is in what the power of what women have been doing in that community?
Oh, absolutely, because they've obviously been given the confidence that they can.
Oh, that's a good one.
And
Well, tell me, what do you mean by
um,
that? Tell me more of what that means.
well, I think that, again, I was struck by, I mean, we did see a very famous graffiti artist that was a guy that was in the cafe. We were there, but we saw a woman that was actively working on a piece on a big mural. The woman that owned the shop that we went into, the couple of women that were in the shop that were the artists, and they obviously, by the way they dressed and their tattoos and piercings and hair color and all that, feel very confident in expressing themselves and through
Yeah,
their artwork. And so that came from
yeah.
somewhere. That didn't, I mean, yeah, some people, we all have our DNA. Some are born more confident than others, but that had to have been nurtured. And they had to have been told along the line, yeah, this is great. Go for it. This is who you are. This is what you love. Do it.
It's funny, as you were saying, the word confidence kept just jumping in my mind, but I know better
Mhm.
than to stop somebody who's intelligent from talking. I knew better. I knew I had to just wait because something pretty profound was going to come out, and sure enough, it did. Uh,
Well, you've been married a
uh,
long time for a reason because you've
that's
learned when to
right.
keep your
That's
mouth
right.
shut, right?
Well, I'm the best husband because I'm actually never home. I'm always traveling. So when I am home, I'm present. But when I'm not home, my wife goes, "Oh, he's gone. Thank God." So
Well, I'm gonna leave
sure.
that one alone for fear that my husband will listen to this podcast.
My wife will hear this one too, and she's gonna, so he's right. It's absolutely true. You know, the confidence part is there, and you again, you mentioned something really profound. It's something that was nurtured. It wasn't. Yeah, we all have this natural ability. It's why you and I are on this podcast right now. We both have this natural confidence and a comfort with each other and in front of a live audience, in front of in front of any kind of situation. There's an inherent confidence, and we all have it in different situations. But the key word you mentioned there is nurtured. What did you mean by that? Did you mean that it was passed down by generation? Did you mean that it was taught? What did you mean by nurtured?
Well, I think that, and it doesn't even necessarily have to mean like from infancy. I think we often think of nurturing something from, birth, but it could be at any time in somebody's life that you're encouraged, and that even when you fail, that you try it and try it again. And I'm sure that all the people that do the beautiful art in those communities didn't just wake up one day, grab a spray paint can or a can of paint and a brush and walk out there and paint something beautiful and
Well, I mean,
fantastic. It started
I
somewhere.
did, except for the beautiful part.
Yeah, well, remember we did have that day, we had our own painting experience, which was in Cartagena. But yeah, like if I didn't think it was hard before,
Yeah.
I knew it was after that. So I think that nurturing is it's a special way that people get nurtured through whatever it is in life. And I just felt that. I felt
Yeah.
that everywhere. I really did. I mean, I asked one of the guides on in the van when we were going someplace about his
Mm-hmm.
tattoos. There were a lot of names that were obvious, and so I asked him about the meaning of those, and they were all associated with people that had meaning in his life that had raised him or were sisters or something. So I think that that's all part of that nurturing process.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because that's something that's come up before as well. I tend to believe, and this is from my own family experience, I tend to believe that when there is any kind of nurture, because I agree with you fully, and I think this is why we enjoy traveling together. When there's this nurtured confidence, nurtured any kind of personality trait, right? So whether it's a nurtured confidence, whether it's a maternal instinct or any kind of protective instinct that's nurtured, it comes from a place of either hardship or a place of pain or a place of or a place of challenge, but it all is tied together with perseverance.
Yeah.
The fact, and it was evident, right? I mean, when anybody goes to these little communities like Community 13, you can
Yeah.
see that everybody here has been through a lot. You can see it on their face, you could see it in their tattoos, you could see it in their expression. You could see that they're painting
Hmm.
you a story of perseverance. And it's hard to
Hmm.
believe that this is a place that just 20 years ago had tanks rolling up on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before that had, an obvious violent past before that as well. And yet here they
Right.
are. I mean, and I remember
Yeah.
I come back to the school. We visited the AMI
Hmm.
school. It's a one that I visited before and one that I'm so grateful you got to join us with because you met Senora Sakura, and you got to see
Yeah.
that she is probably the person that exemplifies what you're talking about, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
When you met her,
Yeah.
what did you have a chance to talk to
Yeah.
her?
A little bit, but I didn't need to. I mean, I don't mean, and I don't mean that in a
Sure.
rude way, like, oh, I didn't want to talk to her. I mean, you just knew from her
Yeah.
presence in the room, from the way she was revered by the younger people in the room, men or women, the children that she was teaching, the love, I mean, you could just tell that at all that she
Yeah.
was the glue in that, or is the glue in that situation. And the ironic thing about it is she probably, or not probably, I'm sure, gets every bit as much or more out of every day that she spends there with those children and helping the families in the community. And that's why she's still doing it and why she's
So
there.
everybody who's watching right now, this is where I just proved my point earlier about how smart Robin is. Because everything she just said is exactly what happened. And I had to talk to Senora Sakura to get these answers. She knew it in the room. And I got the same answers talking to her, and it was you nailed it. She was revered by everybody because of what she's been through, what she persevered through, what she does for the
Yeah.
community, and what she stands for, what she resembles,
Hmm.
and what she
Hmm.
exemplifies. And then when you go
Yeah.
forward, you start hearing her talk. She's very quiet, unlike you or I.
Hmm.
She's very
Yeah. Right. We're
no,
not guilty of that.
she's very quiet. She says few words. And
Yeah.
I remember when we showed up, I had gone up to her, and this goes back to your comment about glue. And I said to her, I said, I made you a promise, and I said, it was the 100 pairs of shoes we were delivering,
Hmm.
and I said,
Right.
we made you a promise, and I made you a promise, when I saw you back in the previous year, and she just stopped and she just said very quietly in Spanish, I don't know where you all came from. That's all she said. And then I
Uh-huh.
said, well, we love you and I love you. And she said, we love you more and I love you the most. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
three sentences, right? Four sentences.
Yeah.
And she was able to deliver a message that would probably take me a half an hour of stumbling to get to. And she did it in three
Right.
sentences
Right.
eloquently. She did it succinctly.
Yes.
And she did it in a way
Yes.
that just grabs you and just what you said, gravitates you towards her to say, this is a person I want in my life. This is a person I want to be near because the energy she gives off. Um,
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
yeah?
And
Is that kind of what
yeah,
you notice?
very accurate. And she exudes all of that without even
Right.
trying, because that's who she is. And that's what makes the difference. And those are the kind of people that have made that community into what it is. And yeah, I just found it just incredible because there's a lot of big cities around the world that have
Right.
amazing graffiti, that have all kinds of communities and stuff, but I have never had that like
Right.
palpable feeling of just that kind of everybody's like looking out for everybody. So, everybody really, I never felt for a
Yeah.
second in any threatened in any way, or like there was anything
Right.
unsafe about the
Right.
situation. And that's the comment that I get the most, and I know you do too, when we talk about Colombia and going there. People are like, oh, that's, why would you go there, that's not safe. And I get that because, one, we've talked about it before, Narcos is not
No.
doing us any
No.
favors. It's great.
It's
I mean, it's great
right.
television and it's entertaining, but it's not helping Colombia right now, that's for sure. And yeah, they have an ugly past. I mean, but it makes them who they are now as well. And none of us get to change
That's right.
that past. All we can do is use it to go forward and do better and make things better. And they are doing that in
Yeah, I mean,
spades.
you can't hide your stripes, right? I mean, you are what
Right.
you are. And I think that's the thing.
Right.
It took the country a long time as a whole to come to terms with what the past was. And I don't mean by coming to terms
Yeah.
with accepting it. I mean more so being comfortable talking about it without having any kind of
Exactly.
a polarizing debate. And just as you said, when you're in that community, it's just very much that. Like that community literally represents what the whole country has come through. It delivers a message,
Yeah.
and the words that she uses, and the words of the people you meet, that those
Yeah.
young kids, you've got these young
Yeah.
kids who have been through a past that you wouldn't wish on any child, and they're
Right.
talking about who's better, LeBron James or Michael Jordan. The fact that they have
Exactly.
enough levity in their present moment, and just as you said earlier, again, proven to my users, to my listeners, that you actually are really astute to this. She has figured out, and what you said about Senor Sakura, she is passing it on to the kids, so it's being
Yeah.
it's being nurtured to them, to be present and to make the most of every single day. These children
Yeah.
have no motivation to talk about LeBron
Right.
James or Michael Jordan as idols, but they do.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
motivation to say thank you for the sneakers. They could just as easily feel like they're entitled to it because of their past, and say that because of what I've been through,
Exactly.
you should be giving me these sneakers. Yet you saw they were so grateful. 2 or 3 days later, we're still getting photos of these
Yes.
kids of getting these sneakers, coming in from different communities and picking up
Yeah.
these sneakers because of what it represented. And I think that's something that we as a global society are still struggling with. And
Mm-hmm.
we have
Mm-hmm.
these
Yeah.
polarizing debates about everything from politics to religion and everything in between. And at one point, somebody has to stop and say, is this really the most important thing we should be talking about? Right? I
Right.
mean,
No, exactly right. And I think that I think that you all are smart
wait.
to put these trips together. Yes, smart. I said it. You're smart. But I did say
Okay,
you
fine.
all. So there was like other people.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I think you had something to do with it. Um, that to take advisors to these places and let us see for ourselves that e- exactly what it's like, and to have these feelings, so then we can talk to our clients about these experiences. And when we know we've got the right client for the right place, putting it all together, and then then you get that
Right.
ripple effect, and it starts to grow. And we've talked on my podcast about how tourism is, for a lot of places, sustainability. They're very intertwined. They don't get the sustainability without the tourists coming in,
That's
without
right.
the tourist dollars, and so
Well,
forth.
and you've mentioned some really important points there, because it's everything you said. It's the fact that it represents something powerful. You're a world traveler. You've been everywhere around the world. When you talk about this, I mean, you've proven to everybody what I've known all along, how observant you are, because you're usually, well, you're not the quietest in the room, and I'm usually the loudest in the room. You're kind of in the middle. So
Oh, that's nice. That's a
yeah,
high
I'm telling you.
compliment.
But you are still observant. So you will be having a conversation, but it's like you have eyes in the back of your head. You'll actually start looking around without actually looking around. It's
I have two children. I have
this
two
is true.
sons, so that comes with the mother card or with the motherhood card. You have to have eyes
So
in the
you've
back of your
got
head.
two sons who know that mom is the best. I've got a son and a daughter. The son knows mom's the best. The daughter thinks she's the
Yeah,
best. So notice how
yeah, well,
in neither one of those equations was I anywhere near the top. Uh,
yeah. Well, it's probably it's a good thing that you
I
understand
have
that and know
fully
that.
accepted it. I have no problem accepting it. But in your global travels, and you've been
Mhm.
to, I mean, how many countries have you been to now? What's the number at?
Gosh, I haven't really counted lately, to be honest with you.
It's it's a
I don't
lot. I
know,
know it's a lot.
50,
Yeah, there you go.
50-ish, something or something in that
Well,
neighborhood,
and I
I
mean,
think.
in 50-ish places, there's got to be some broad strokes that you've picked up when it comes to
Yeah,
women in
yeah,
society. Anything you can
most
share about
definitely.
that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, how long do you have? No.
All the time we
Um,
need.
yeah, yeah. So, well, let me take it back almost to the beginning. I my first real foray into international travel, if you will. I mean, I'd done like the European tour as a college student, and I had the privilege of getting to travel with my family when
Sure.
I was younger and all of that. But I moved and went to work in Japan when I was in my early 20s. And I'm not going to say exactly when that was, but it was a long time
1985,
ago.
right?
And yeah,
Oh,
not too far off there.
1995?
Yeah, closer to that, exactly. So anyway, but that's a society that's a very
Sure.
male dominated society. And I came there to help. I was working in a horse business at the time, thoroughbred horses. So I went to work, worked a little while in Tokyo, and then I went up north and worked on a farm in Hokkaido, a thoroughbred breeding and training facility. And it was very apparent to me just how women were not revered, not, they had their very definite functions and roles, and they were not expected to ever step outside of those. And yeah, without going into a lot of detail, I didn't fit that mold very
I
well.
wonder why.
So I did tell them what they asked me. They were asking me to help them with
You
some
didn't
things,
stop
but
there, though, did you? No.
yeah, I kind of had a little
Yeah,
trouble with the
that's all.
brakes.
And that's
Anyway,
a good
so
thing, actually.
yeah, and before that, I had been in Australia, and I had also worked a little bit in England and Ireland and France. This was all horse related stuff, and the horse business, for many that don't know, in general, is a very male dominated business, and it's changed a lot over the last 30 years. I have not been back to Japan recently. I haven't been back in 20 some odd years, but that to me was a really stark difference from how I had grown up and what I had been taught, and the way that I saw women being really in general at that time. And I know I didn't
Sure.
see every woman in Japan. I'm not trying to, cast a
Sure.
broad brush here, but or almost subservient, in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it was so different
Right.
for me. It was just a very, like I said, stark contrast. So I've seen that. I've been to Africa. I've been to Kenya. Seen, how women in general, in a lot of, not in general. Let me take that back. How women are treated
Yeah.
differently depending on what sort of situation they're in. If they're in a tribe where there are women that are you have or men that have multiple wives, or if they are in Christian families that are one man one woman, if they live
Yeah.
in Nairobi in the middle of the city, um, so it's very everywhere you go, it's a little
Well,
different.
and I have to agree with you. I mean, I'm originally from Kenya, and I saw it firsthand. And it's also the tribe part is really key because even from an Indian background, it's the same thing exists. In terms of it,
Hmm.
and then that's what makes it so special in terms of what's happening in Comuna 13, because it's almost like that one little area as a microcosm. of the global footprint,
Yep.
right? Of the global movement. And everything that we're discussing, it's happening in real time, and it's been happening in real time.
Right.
And it's almost like that's
Right.
become the baseline for us to say, if we want to find out how we get the answer, let's just go here. If we want to
Mm-hmm.
find out as a global
Yeah.
society how we get to a point where women are treated like equals, where women are the respected for what they are, in terms of being the one that nurtures down the most powerful lessons, the glue that holds the society together, really the people that are the true leaders. If we want to get
Yeah.
to a place where we accept that, let's just visit Community 13 and see what's happening in this
Right.
one little area, which represent, one millionth of a fraction of what the world
Mm-hmm.
is. Yet it is already right now executing what we all
Yep.
aspire to
Yep.
to achieve in larger society. You know,
Absolutely.
what
Yeah.
else in your global travels? Was there any place in particular that you went to and just said, this particular, in a small community, a small town, said these guys are getting it right? Meaning, did you feel the way you felt in Community 13 anywhere else in the world that you've traveled to?
Oh,
Loaded question, I know.
yeah, no, I mean, I don't, I think that in some places in Kenya, yes, I have, because they're those tiny little communities that are really strongly knit and, and by our standards, have
Right.
nothing. And you do see the women are, again, just they're the glue of those communities as well. And I think that would really be the closest place that was similar. And I actually came back from Colombia this last time, and somebody said, "What do you love so much about it?" And I said, "I see a lot of similarities in the people between Kenya and in Colombia." I said, "I think I feel
I
that."
couldn't agree with you
So,
more. I mean, I was giving a talk recently, and somebody asked me about my heritage, and I remember I couldn't believe I said it. I said, "Look, I love everywhere I visit to. My heritage is in Kenya, it's in India, my heart's in several places. Whether it's in
mhm,
Peru, whether it's in Tanzania, whether it's in Egypt, there's something there, and we're going to come to Egypt in a second because I definitely
yeah,
have a heart for Egypt as well. There's just something about
mhm.
what's happening in Community 13. Again, back to what we were saying earlier about how fact that this little community represents the movement that we're trying to achieve in other parts of the world in a small area.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So you and I are going to be traveling together in November. We're going to be heading to
Yes.
Egypt together. And that's actually something really powerful because tourism is, again, here a driver for women in Egypt as well. Any preconceived notions or any conclusions you've already formed before we go that you want to share?
Well, I try really hard not to be honest with you. I try not to listen to the noise, not to listen to the news.
Good for you.
I don't I don't do a lot of preparation, because I wanna go into it with my mind open. I mean, you hear things about, some people comment on, "Oh, it's dirty," or and by our standards,
Sure.
streets aren't clean or whatever. That kind of stuff I'm
Right.
not talking about. I'm talking about more the culture and the people. And I mean, I'm absolutely obviously over the moon to see all the pyramids, the tombs, going to all these places that I've seen pictures of and, dreamed of for so long. I'm excited about that. But as you
Yes.
know, when we're talking about is meeting the people is to me one of the most exciting parts of travel. And because it teaches me and I think helps me to show and speak to the fact that we are all really the same. I don't care where you go. I mean, whether you're in Japan or Australia or Europe or Africa, Colombia, South America, whatever, we're just, you peel that skin off and it's
That's
all the
right.
same underneath.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
and everybody's, has the same capacity for loving one another, for respecting one another, for building each other up. And I love seeing that, and I think when you get out of the United States, sometimes you actually see
I
more
agree.
of that in the places where people have
Right.
less. You see more of that.
I think again, as usual, I think you've nailed it because what we saw in Colombia, and just having been going to Egypt since I was 15 years old, and excited to show you as well. That same movement we saw in Community 13 is happening in places like Zamalek. It's happening in small towns or small suburbs of Cairo. It's happening in some of the areas around with the Bedouins near Mount Sinai, for example. It's starting to happen where you start seeing these conversations, and it wasn't always that way. And I think that's I think there are several places, and Kenya, I couldn't agree with you more. There's definitely these communities where the women are the same way. They are revered for what they are, more than just their function in society. They are revered for their contribution, and I would call it their invisible contribution, because what's being put out to society by them is not something all of us see. It's not about building something, creating something. You can't see nurturing. You can't see adhesion.
Right.
You cannot see fortitude. You can feel it, and I think there are places in this world, and I believe Egypt is one of them. I believe Colombia obviously is one of them. I believe parts of Kenya are one of them, and I juxtapose that with places like Sudan, where my mom was born, where I used to visit there as a child, and it doesn't exist there. They're not there yet, and so where I wanted to talk about next was societies that are not there yet, but you see, there was that phrase where there's a will, there's a way. Have you been to any place where you came back and said, if only if they just did this, was there, and you don't have to name any specific towns, but
Yeah,
was
yeah.
any experiences like that?
Oh, yeah, sure, sure. But again, you have to be a little careful of that because there's a natural progression to these things. And like you've talked about it before, as far as, governments that have dictators and things. And we in the Western world like to sit there and go, oh, they have this horrible dictator and it's awful and the poor people. And yeah, there's a lot of that that's true, but also without that dictator in power, the anarchy that
Right,
might ensue would ravage
right,
the country. So they might just not be ready yet. They might just not have gotten
right,
to that point
right,
in time. And I think that the best things that we can do as a Western world is a lot of things that we are doing. If we take medicine and our knowledge about healthcare in, if we take education in, if we take, love and learning and food, and those are the places to
right.
start. It's not by coming in and saying, you got to get rid of this dictator and you got to have this kind of government and it's got to start from the
Right,
ground up. And so that even though there's places that, you know, we'd like to see further along than they are, it's part of their story that's unfolding too. And I don't mean that to sound kind of like, oh, it's all flowers and roses,
no,
and it's not. It's horrible to go through. It's like what
right.
Columbia went through. Um,
But
but it's look at them now. They're blooming and blossoming, and what's coming up out of that is
it's the
amazing.
perseverance that we talked about, right? It's what we talked
Yeah.
about earlier. The fact that all of this energy and all of what we see in a place like Community 13, where women take a forefront and a central role in the progress, which is where they should
Hmm.
be. I think you're right. It
Hmm.
has to be happen organically. It can't be mandated. It can't be mandated because who are
Right.
we to mandate it to another
Yeah.
country, right? We don't have it. We
Right.
don't have it perfect here
Exactly.
either. Uh,
That's
you know,
exactly right. Exactly right. And that's what, again, you all do so well, and that I feel like is part of my passion for what I do in work is working with people that want to
right.
go deeper when they travel. They want to go into the communities. They want to see and
That's
meet
right.
the people. It's not just about, okay, we're going to
Right.
check that pyramid off our list. And yeah, we went to Luxor and we went and we saw this and we saw that, but to actually let's head into the markets. Let's go into
That's right.
somebody's home. Let's go to that school in Colombia. Those kind of things are, I think, where we in the travel business can really make a difference by opening those doors. And not everybody
Right.
wants to do that, which is fine too, but those people that do like to
Right.
travel that way, that's where I feel like we have a huge opportunity to, bust the gates open and say, come on,
Yeah, no, I think you're, and you mentioned gates again. I love the subtlety there because we always talk about this glass ceiling. It's not. It's actually a
Yeah,
gate. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not about progressing up. You're already up. It's about progressing forward. And I know it's
right,
metaphorical. I know it's not, we're
right.
talking semantics here, but it really is, again, where I think we tend to, as a society, tend to get stuck in the weeds is we start
Hmm.
putting the things, and everything's important, obviously, but we sometimes start to forget where the priorities are. And that's where I think a place like Camino 13 gets it right, where Medellin gets it right, where, as we'll see
Yeah,
in a place like Egypt and what you said in Kenya, there are certain places that get it right. And yes, you said it earlier, right?
yeah,
Not everybody is going to have that rosy picture. There has to be hardship
yeah,
because this kind of nurturing, this kind of perseverance, this kind of adhesion that you're talking about has to come from a place of hardship. I often hear this phrase that you can't appreciate a paved road until you've been over a bumpy road.
yeah,
You can't, you ever been driving
yeah,
down a highway and you get on the regular tarmac and you feel like the grain of the pavement. Then you got this brand new section of pavement and you go, ooh, that's nice.
yeah,
That's really
yeah,
quiet.
yeah,
Same thing.
yeah.
I think it's the same thing.
Right, right. Right. No, it is. It
Yeah.
is very, very much. It's like, you won't appreciate that bicycle very much until you've had to walk the
That's
same distance
right.
you just
That's
did on
right.
the bicycle.
Well, it's okay. So it's funny you say that because that's something that I noticed. You've noticed everything. It's something that I noticed, and I'm willing to bet you noticed this long before I did. But I noticed this that the number of steps you saw, the number of steps that came into 13, and all of these they built
Yes.
up on hills, whether all the different communities around
Yes.
Medellin, the number of steps you have to go
Yes.
up. The fact that these people will climb up these steps happily. That Tia
Yeah.
that we met with the ice, with the ice, right, with the flavored ice, her
Hmm.
shop was probably 3/4 of the way up. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a place that you can just take supplies to and just drive a car up to. You actually had to
Yeah.
carry everything up. And the fact that they're willing to do that for nothing more than pride
Hmm.
of belonging, pride of where they are. A
Hmm.
place that some of us would drive
Hmm.
by and go, oh, that's actually, it's one of the poorest parts of Medellin, and you associate that
Hmm.
saying, well, yeah, it's kind of a shanty town. You don't want to go there. When you look closer and go, no, it's actually one of the most expressive parts of the country. And as
Yes.
we said earlier, it
Yes.
is literally, it is motion, progress in motion in a
Yeah.
small little
Yeah.
speck of land compared to the whole world. It's like it's that vision of those movies, right? Where you take a picture of where you're standing and that zooms out to your state, to your country, to the world, and then turns out that your entire globe is like sitting in the locker of somebody else who's in a much bigger world, who's in a much
Yes.
bigger world, who's in a much bigger world.
Right.
This
Right.
small little area is doing what the rest of the world is still trying to do. And what we've established is that there are other small places like Camino 13, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in Kenya, that are doing the same thing. And it's up to us as travelers, industry
Yeah.
aside, it's up to us as world travelers, people who want to see the world, people who take solace in the fact that travel is a form of education and as a form of enlightenment, I guess, that we
Yeah.
see this occurring, and
Yes.
it's powerful in terms of it.
It
So,
is.
well, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and I can't wait to travel with you in Egypt. And I would say that when you're back from Egypt, we should carry this conversation even then to see what you think of after you got back, and to see if that same feeling you had in Camino 13 exists in a part of Cairo. It may or may not. But I can't wait
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
what you think. So, any final words you want to share before we sign off?
Now, I think we did a good job covering it, and no, I'd love to come back and do this again, and always enjoy
Likewise.
talking with you. And thank you for having me on. And it's great to have kindred spirits that in the world that want to see the same uh, people have the same benefits from travel, whether it be the people that are traveling to or the people that are receiving guests in their
Absolutely right.
countries.
No, well said. Well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, all of you, for listening as well. Can't wait to see you again next time, Robin, and can't wait to travel with you as well.
Yep.
So, till next time, see you guys later.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. Would love to hear from you. See you next time.